Ministro da Economia Paulo Guedes foi entrevistado nesta terça-feira pela CNN Internacional no programa de Economia e Negócios First Move. Nós vamos exibir alguns trechos dessa entrevista. Um dos assuntos abordados pela apresentadora Julia Chatterley foi a estratégia do governo federal para combater a pandemia, vacinação da população e a marca de mais de 600 mil mortes por Covid que o nosso país atingiu na semana passada. Para Paulo Guedes, declarações de que o Brasil não priorizou salvar vidas durante a pandemia, essas declarações são injustas.
Minister Paulo Guedes. Minister Guedes, fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. I think the statistics speak for themselves. There are great challenges. The economy was hit by the coronavirus, but there are also reasons for optimism in the recovery. How optimistic are you, sir?
Oh, hi, Julia. Well, I've just updated the facts on vaccines. Mass vaccination is, a matter of fact, advancing so fast that we have already 90% of population, adult population, that received already the first dose, and 60% of the whole population, adult population, that received that are fully vaccinated. So we are watching a safe return to work. The economy is rebounding very sharply. Brazil dropped less than most advanced countries, recovered faster, and is growing higher than the average, not only of Latin America and the Eurozone, but also the advanced countries. So we digitalized 68 million people. We provided direct income transfers to the most vulnerable citizens. We mass vaccinated the population, the adult population. We created more than 3 million new jobs from the bottom. We recovered in a V-shaped, very strong recovery, creating a lot of jobs, 3.5 million new formal jobs and another 3.5 informal jobs. And hard facts are clear evidence that our policy responses were effective because we preserved 1/3 of the formal jobs with our job preservation program, helping, instead of the company firing the guy, they would call us, since we digitalized 68 million vulnerables, and then we would give a supplement for the wage payments. So we spent 10.5% of GDP primary deficit, and we bounced it back to 1.5% again this year. So we sustained a double commitment. Health in first place, preserving lives, but on the other hand, fiscal responsibility. So all expenses paid on health services, on vaccinations, we cut on the other side. We controlled, we didn't give wage increases during these 2 years. We are implementing structural reforms. I think Brazil is the only country in the world that is implementing structural reforms during the pandemic. Independent central bank, fiscal triggers, regulatory frameworks. We are changing the regulatory frameworks for oil and gas, for electricity. Brazil is now the largest investment frontier in the world.
Minister, you have a lot going on as you've laid out, and I want to congratulate you on the progress on vaccinations, which is a huge achievement, I think, given what we're seeing elsewhere in the world. But I do want to ask you, in light of what you've said, and you mentioned the economy and the fact that you're trying to build jobs and the progress that you've made there. In some ways, the handling of the pandemic came at great cost. Human life cost, and it was a choice made by the government, and no, the government's been criticised for it, and we will look back, I'm sure, and talk about it. Was it the right choice to continue to try and battle to keep the economy open, to preserve jobs as best you could, even at the cost of human life? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think this is fair. I think it's political noise. I don't think Brazil made a choice. Quite the contrary. Our choice was exactly to preserve lives in the first place. That's why we spent 10.5% of GDP in direct income transfers to poor people so that they could practice social distancing. That's exactly what happened. We lost 1 million formal jobs in 40 days, 45 days, and we preserved lives, exactly extending the social programs, decentralizing money. So there is a lot of political noise saying that we made a choice, the wrong choice. It is quite the contrary. We made the right choice. We preserved lives. We practiced social distancing. I myself went for 1 year and a half. I didn't go to my home in Rio de Janeiro. I spent the whole time in Brasilia working with social distance, with masks, with vaccination. So it is a political noise. All information has signals and noise. The signals we are giving is exactly that we practice social distance. That's why GDP collapsed 4.1%. That's why unemployment blew higher. But then what happened is that we are vaccinating, mass vaccinating, and the economy is rebounding.
Vamos agora com mais um trecho da entrevista do ministro da Economia à CNN Internacional. Paulo Guedes foi questionado sobre combate ao desemprego, inflação e a participação do Brasil na COP26, encontro a ser realizado em Glasgow para discutir medidas de proteção ao meio ambiente. O ministro afirmou que o Brasil vai criar um pacote de 2,5 bilhões de dólares em infraestrutura verde, que será anunciado na conferência a ser realizada no começo de novembro. Nas palavras de Paulo Guedes, o Brasil está completamente envolvido no que diz respeito ao desafio das mudanças climáticas.
I want to talk about tackling unemployment. I also want to talk to you about rising prices, because I know this is another challenge that you're facing and you have to tackle. What's the plan as far as getting more of those jobs back, and how concerned are you by rising prices?
Well, first about investments and growth. Because we are changing the regulatory framework, we already have investment commitments of more than $100 billion on oil, on natural gas, on renewable energy, wind, eolic energy, on cabotage. So Brazil is really, with its regulatory framework changes, is already received $100 billion investment commitments for the future. So the big challenge now that we are facing is how to transform a cyclical recovery out of the COVID based on direct income transfers and sustainable consumption. We want to transform this into an investment-based recovery. That's the big challenge ahead. And again, I think Brazil will surprise in the upside. People were saying that Brazil would collapse 10%, and I saw Spain more than 10% drop. I saw Italy more than 8%. I saw UK more than 9%. I saw France more than 7% drop. I saw Germany more than 5%. I saw Japan 4.5%, and Brazil 4%. Exactly because we practiced the social distance. We waited for the vaccines. When the vaccines came, we mass vaccinated the population, and the economy bounced back.
I guess the counter to that would be that they lost, as a proportion, less lives. And I don't want to debate it again because, as you say, it feels like political noise. But the comparisons in growth aren't accurate unless you're comparing the human cost too. Minister, we had the president of Colombia on the show yesterday, and he was saying for less wealthy nations making choices now, and it goes exactly to your point about investing for the future, talking about perhaps climate investment as a specific example. He said that the international economy need to allow more leeway for spending for countries like yours. So climate spending, for example, shouldn't be included in the deficit calculation. There should be debt forgiveness for positive investment in things like transitioning your economy and climate spending in particular. Would you agree with that? Because that would help.
Julia, we spend more than double the average of emerging countries and 10% more than the average of advanced economies saving lives. So I do not accept your narrative. We spend more money saving lives than you. We spend more money saving lives than advanced countries, 10% more. And we use it double the expenditure saving lives than the average of emerging countries. So having said that, I agree that some relief on debt, some additional help is very interesting and very important to continue to protect lives. So be sure of that. The first thing we did was to preserve lives. The second thing was exactly mass vaccination, that people could come back to a safe return to work. And this, we still have still in use all our layers of protection for the poor people. All the layers are still there. We are phasing out very slowly. They were around $100 in the beginning, in the first year. Then we reduced it to $70. So we are reducing slowly these layers of protection as people get back safely return to work. I think inflation, which was your second issue in the last question, inflation is all over the world. Half of inflation is exactly food and energy. That's why our protection is still there. We'll keep the protection. We will raise our direct income transfers for poor people exactly to pay for higher food prices and higher energy prices. And the thing is going on all over the world. You just announced it before we start talking here. You just announced an increase in the coal prices in China because it is raining too much. And in Brazil was the other way around. It's raining too little. What sends us to the next theme, which is exactly climate change. Brazil is entirely involved. We'll be in Glasgow announcing our Green Growth Program, our entire responsibility, commitment, accountability with responsiveness to the climate change challenge. So it's $2.5 billion announced exactly with sustainable infrastructure, with climate change. We know the future is green. We know the future is digital, and we'll be there. Brazil is a green power. And Brazil is the fourth largest digital market in the world.
Vamos então ao último trecho que nós separamos sobre a entrevista dada hoje pelo ministro Paulo Guedes ao programa First Move da CNN Internacional. Questionado sobre as revelações da investigação Pandora Papers, que citou uma empresa com participação de Guedes localizada num paraíso fiscal, o ministro afirmou que a sua offshore é legal e que não fez nada de errado.
So we will talk again about your focus on climate, because I am actually fascinated in the work that you're doing, and I actually think that's misunderstood. But I do want to understand, and I'm sure you'll forgive me for the question, I want to ask about the findings from the Pandora Papers. And they revealed that you had significant wealth held abroad. And I think there's two questions, really. There's one of transparency and whether the Brazilian people had the right to know. And then I think there's a question of whether you've benefited from things like the fall in the Brazilian real. So can I ask, have you done anything wrong? Do you feel like you've done anything wrong?
It is a good question and a chance to explain. Yes. I've done nothing wrong at all. As a matter of fact, before assuming office, I sold my participation in most investments I had directly that I could affect. I put a blind trust on my Brazilian properties. I sold direct investment. I lost 4 or 5 times more than the value of this company when I accepted to go to the government. The offshore is legal, reported to the ethics committee of the president. It's declared to Internal Revenue Service. And it's also registered at the central bank. And I left the board of the company weeks before accepting the office. And more than that, last week, the Supreme Court dismissed the case.
So you've done nothing wrong, sir, just to reiterate?
Nothing whatsoever.
Minister, It was great to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for answering my questions. And please come back and talk to us soon, because I received your climate report very early this morning, and I would love to talk to you specifically about that, because I know there's a lot going on in your country. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Julia.